Nick Matthews is a visionary cinematographer whose work has captivated audiences with its striking visuals and atmospheric tension.
I've always been fascinated by stories that are about the human condition. I've been fascinated by the idea of life on the fringes. I'm interested in sort of people that live in the margins.
Best known for his collaboration on SawX, Matthews' cinematography brings a unique depth to the horror genre, blending artful composition with visceral intensity.
I was using color palette, I was using movement, I was using visual design as a way to thematically tell that story. Every film that I make, I try to do something different and something new and something that is unique to that project and that speaks uniquely to that project. You don't want every job. Not every job is right for you. Not every job is a yes. You want somebody that's excited about you for the job.
His ability to craft suspense and immerse viewers in dark, intricate worlds has made him a standout in the film industry.
It's your unique point of view that's a result of all the art you've witnessed, all the experiences you've had, the pain, the trauma, but also the transcendence, the joy, the beauty. The love that you've experienced. Those are all going to be a part of how you speak to the world.
With a career that spans a variety of genres, Matthews' approach to cinematography is defined by his meticulous attention to detail and innovative use of lighting and camera work.
I think of shot listing as a chance to rewrite the script. You're rewriting it visually. I'm going to take the color palette that they're imbuing into the set and into the spaces, and I'm going to use that in my lighting.
In this episode, Nick will take us on an incredible journey through his humble beginnings to the massively successful career he has created for himself, covering tips on how you can also grow as a filmmaker.
I had a van that somebody put in neutral and we watched it roll down a hill and into somebody's house. You have to figure out, okay, we don't have all the gear that we thought we were gonna have. How do you keep going? I got an IV. I was back on set in 45 minutes. And it's you just gotta roll. And I was I'm not letting anyone else shoot this movie.
Nick Matthews continues to inspire a new generation of filmmakers to push the limits of what film can achieve, proving that the lens is as much a tool for emotion as it is for narrative.
Hi, I'm Nick Matthews, and you're watching Behind the Scenes with MasterShot.
What inspired you to become a filmmaker, and what were the milestones at the beginning of your career?
Growing up, I was always fascinated by stories and storytelling and literature, and that kind of became the direct pipeline for me to filmmaking. I was immediately fascinated by writers like Kafka and Flannery O'Connor, and I was reading all sorts of literature, and I loved world building and stories like Lord of the Rings and all sorts of stuff like that. That reading led me into writing. I was writing as young as a kid, and I was playing stories and making up stories all the time. So in high school for me, I bought my first camcorder. A couple of friends came over, and at one point, one of them was we should make a movie together. And so that actually really started my journey with filmmaking. We were doing it on early cameras where we were doing direct to tape editing and shooting. So every time we would shoot a shot, then we would have to go find the next shot. I was learning about editing, continuity, shot design, storytelling structure. I remember I saw this film, The Elephant Man by David Lynch, and that was actually a big film in my journey because it was the first time I saw a movie that was really literary, where it was using all sorts of motifs and symbolism. And I grew up in a very Christian, fundamentalist, religious background. And so movies were censored. They were not, I wasn't allowed to go to the movie theaters till I was in college. My first movie in a movie theater was The Prestige. So I grew up where movies were there was something alluring about them because they were sort of taboo. But also at the same time, I did grow up watching Lawrence of Arabia and 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining and a bunch of other films. And when I was in high school, that's when I got, that was the Netflix DVD kind of era. And so I was starting to watch a lot of films through that. So that kind of started my journey with filmmaking. Eventually I would go on to, I studied in school a bit, but I didn't go to film school. I studied communications, electronic media, but I was always making shorts. I was making films. I was directing, writing, doing all sorts of different kinds of projects. And eventually I discovered that, once I came to Los Angeles, I did an internship in LA. I worked on an independent movie that had some big names, Peter Dinklage, Steve Buscemi, Mark Quinn Jr., a bunch of other people. And I was an intern on that movie. Kind of in that process, I made some shorts where it was the first time where I had a crew. And I realized in the process of directing, I actually wanted to be a cinematographer. I loved being behind the camera. I loved telling visual stories. I loved the way that lighting and framing and movement could subconsciously create a world and change the way that you experienced the story that was being told. It felt like the way to bring in symbolism and motif and themes into the image making in a way that I was really excited by. That eventually led to kind of a weird path for me. I worked for a religious organization for a while. I walked away from faith while I was at that place. But while I was there, I was starting to make films on the side. And so that voice and that interest and that passion never left. You know, in my early 20s, I had this moment where I was like, if I don't give this a shot now, it's only gonna get harder later. So I moved to Los Angeles and I called myself a cinematographer. I had a reel under my belt, just enough work that I had done that I was able to say, I've shot stuff. But it was the beginning of a journey, and I started looking for things online, Craigslist, Mandy, Staff Me Up, whatever was available at the time. That was the very early path, in the early parts of my journey. I've always been fascinated by stories that are about the human condition. I've been fascinated by the idea of life on the fringes. I'm interested in sort of people that live in the margins. I'm fascinated by the way in which our point of view shapes our reality. And I love stories that explore that.
What was the biggest breakthrough moment in your career so far?
So I moved to Los Angeles. I'm terrified. I brought just one carload worth of things, not knowing kind of where to begin. I started just applying to stuff on Mandy and Craigslist and all these sort of online platforms. And I actually booked my first movie off of the internet. It was a crazy film. The person that directed it was essentially using his father's oil money to make this movie. But I learned a lot on that film. We shot for over 20 days. It was my first time making a film, $500,000 movie with a group of people. And it was my first time getting to explore that kind of visual story structure on screen. So I was terrified, but I also learned a ton. In a lot of ways, it's felt like there's never been one big kind of magic bullet moment. It's been little steps taken along the way, risks taken along the way that's led to the next thing, that's led to the next thing. But in that journey, I kind of discovered music videos, I discovered shooting commercials, and also continued to make independent films. And I would say it took me 6 independent films to shoot a movie that I was like, this is the kind of story that I want to make. The first film that I shot that I felt like this is my voice was called Cuck. It's a film about an alt-right vlogger who ends up going on a killing spree. It's very much about America, and was about America in that time. We shot it in 2018. But up until that point, I had been making a variety of thrillers and drama. And in each of those, I had been crafting and designing a visual look, was able to tell the story that we were crafting together in a really unique way. So I learned on every single film. I was using color palette, I was using movement, I was using visual design as a way to thematically tell that story. And I'm proud of the visual language of all those films, but it took me some time to find my voice and to find the kind of work that I wanted to do, and this sort of work that spoke to our culture, work that spoke to our human condition, and also was made with a certain darkness and a certain grunginess and a certain violence. I'm fascinated by, it's that sort of beauty and brutality, sex and violence, like that part of who we are as people and sort of those primal elements of who we are. Along the way though, I got a chance to, one of my first music videos was actually, I shot a project with Ice Cube, and it was a crazy experience, and Ice Cube was very kind and easy to work with. We shot for 2 days. I think when I saw the shot list, it wasn't even a shot list. It was, here's 40 scenes we're gonna shoot. And I was like, holy shit, what? But the way we went about it was just the director staged these scenes, and then we would jump in, and he was just like, get me something else. And so I'd jump in, and we'd shoot all these big crowd scenes, but I was just moving around in like a documentarian and finding all these different pieces. And I remember coming from narrative and having done so much narrative, I was like, I'm so used to this sort of structured design to we design a shot list, we design a scene, and then we're coming in and shooting it. And this was a much different approach to shooting. And so I've been able to work on a number of music videos, and I love that art form, and I love what you're able to do with that and how you're able to explore. And then commercials became a part of my life. Just at a certain point, I'm like, oh, this is how you survive in this industry in the process of making movies and getting more selective with your films. Once after I shot Cuck, since then I've only done movies that I've actually felt like they were a part of my voice and a part of the kinds of films I wanted to make. And it really has been, in a lot of ways, there's been a lot of luck. I think the main thing that's held true is I keep trying to make the kinds of films and stories and visuals that excite me and that I'm interested in and compelled by and want to tell. And I think that's been kind of the through line. And doing that has led to projects that have been the kinds of things I wanted to make and the stories I wanted to tell. And so that's, that kind of led in really random ways to other projects. So I ended up doing a horror film for Shudder that a producer I'd known for 7 years, who I met off of Kickstarter, was producing, and I had reached out to her and she's like, actually, we're making a movie right now. The director likes your work. Do you want to interview? And then 3 weeks later, I was on set shooting that movie. Really fast prep, really fast, experience. After that, like a commercial director that I'd known for a long time, through happenstance and chance and a lot of years of him fighting for the kind of thing he wanted to do, we got to make this movie Mobland with John Travolta and Stephen Dorff. And that happened in a really quick way. I got a call from him, and I think within a week I was flying out to Georgia. We had 2.5 weeks of prep, 11 days of shooting. It was one of those movies that was just, it's made in an incredibly fast way. And you have to lean on all of those instincts that you've developed over the years to make a movie that quickly. And then I, some months after that, shooting that film, because I kind of went on a run of about 4 movies in a year, I actually got a call from my agent, and he was like, I have the script. I think you're gonna be interested. It's the next Saw film. And it was SawX. And I think I received it under the title of Party Invite. I read it. I interviewed that day with the director. We talked for like an hour and a half. I told him Saw was a big deal to me in high school. Like, it was one of those movies I fought, in this religious context, to be able to watch, to be able to experience. And I remember watching it and being like, oh my God, this movie's insane. I love this movie. The twist is great. I love how violent it is. I love the way that the camera moves in this film. And so to have an opportunity to interview on it, I was nervous, but I was also really excited. And I told Kevin, the director, I'm like, this is the best script in the franchise, like hands down. It focuses on Tobin Bell, who's playing John Kramer, Jigsaw, takes the audience on a journey through his eyes that they'd never gone on before, because he's never been the central figure of any of the stories told in the franchise. And so I was just really excited to interview for it. And then he talked to a few directors that I'd worked with and, wanted to know if I was collaborative, wanted to know what kind of my sensibilities were. And then I was hired a day later. So that took me to Mexico 4 or 5 months and was a whole journey and exciting experience. And then while I was shooting that film, I got a call for the second feature of one of the directors I already worked with. And we went and made a movie in Georgia a month after I got back from shooting Saw. So it was a run of movies, and then the strikes happened. It hasn't felt like there's been one specific moment. It's just been these runs of things that happen and kind of along the way. And I felt very fortunate and lucky to be able to do this.
What did you do to grow as a filmmaker? And would you do the same thing if you were starting over today?
I think that I've been somebody who has taken the mindset of what got you where you are won't take you where you're going or where you want to go. And so all along the way, in order to continue to survive and to thrive, it's you sink or you swim. It's like we're either growing or we're shrinking. And so there's this sort of idea of like, I want to constantly evolve. I want to do new things. I want to take new risks. I want to explore new ideas. I don't want to find myself stuck in the ways of the past. And so I tried to take that approach into my filmmaking. Every film that I make, I try to do something different and something new and something that is unique to that project and that speaks uniquely to that project. That's also been my approach in kind of the learning process. I didn't go to film school. I didn't have any formal education with filmmaking. A lot of my learning came from trial and error. It came from reading a lot of books. And I scoured the internet. There are all sorts of websites. There's great DPs, Roger Deakins, David Mullen, Sean Bobbitt, all sorts of cinematographers who've been willing to share about their experience online. And I was reading those interviews. I was trying those things out. I was shooting on all sorts of different cameras and trying to learn them. And so it was really this process of essentially setting up scenarios for myself where I could learn. In the very beginning, I was actually shooting shots for my reel because I was like, I don't have enough material to show a diversity of projects at this point. When I was working for this religious organization, at that time, it's like I didn't want to market myself as somebody who had shot a lot of religious content, because I knew I want to make movies that have world building. I want to make movies that are, in the public eye. And also I was walked away from faith at that point in my life. So I didn't want to be known for those things. But it's like, how do you pivot from having your body of work be one thing into a new thing? So the process was spending a lot of time learning, shooting projects on the side, shooting short films, shooting commercial work, doing those kinds of things, trying new things out every single time, using new filters, new lenses, all of that sort of thing was a way to try and kind of a new approach every single time. And the way that I learned was both that trial and error, but it was also asking people questions. When I got to Los Angeles, I reached out to a lot of people, and I've continued that approach even to this day, where I'm reaching out to cinematographers, asking them specific questions, not how did you get to where you are, but things like, I saw this project that you did and it really struck something with me. And I wanted to know, why did you shoot it in this specific way? Why did you shoot this scene this way? And the thing that I found is most artists are really excited to share about their experience and really excited to share about their story and their vision. And there's a reason that they did something the way that they did. So I've actually found that you get a lot of great response by reaching out in that very specific way, rather than just reaching out with like, hey, I want to be where you are. Hey, I want a job. It's being very specific. It's recognizing the work that's gone on in that person's career. Even reading, I think the more that you understand about story structure, the more that you understand about life in general, the more that that's going to become a part of your unique perspective. And so, all of us have the life experience that we've lived that becomes a part of the way in which we see the world. That's actually fundamental to who you are as an artist. It's your unique point of view that's a result of all the art you've witnessed, all the experiences you've had, the pain, the trauma, but also the transcendence, the joy, the beauty, the love that you've experienced. Those are all going to be a part of how you speak to the world. And it's one of the things I love about that is we're living in a time now where people of all sorts of race, gender, sexuality are getting the opportunity to speak, and they get to uniquely speak to their community, to their culture, to their experience in a way that somebody else really couldn't. And I think one of the beauties of being a cinematographer is I get to bring my own experience of the world, but I get to bring that in service of a director and in telling the story that they're trying to tell. So I get to throw all my great ideas, all the things that I'm hopeful about, all the things I want to do at a director, and then they get to take what is working for them and sort of they get to refine what that is. And I actually love that about the process. One of the things I wish I had known early on was people who have a community and people who are making great work often already have a team of people that are around them that they're working with. One, that means expect that when you go into meetings and when you're reaching out to people and you're getting to meet people, you're looking to develop a relationship. You're not looking for the next job. You're not looking for, how do I just make a quick buck? You're looking for, how do I build a community with people who I respect? Because these are people who probably have 4 and 5 and 6 production designers, directors of photography, who they respect and work with already. But what's going to happen is along the way, those people are going to get busy, and then they might have a small job that they are like, I have just the person for this, someone I've been talking to, I want to try out, and I want to see if we work well together. And then maybe you get your shot and you guys see if you work well together on set. But now you have a common language because you've developed a friendship, and you've developed trust. And rather than looking at artists as like, here's the next specific project I'm doing, it's looking at them as, how can I serve their career and the longevity of their career and their career path? That's kind of the fundamental thing. It's empowering the people that are working with you to bring their best selves to the project, because that's when they're going to be the most excited to be there and going to give you the best work, So really it's a bit Machiavellian, but that is actually like how I look at it. Some of the things I wish I had done differently in that process are also, it's reaching out to people earlier. When I started, I was just like, I have nothing. I have no work to use to get other work. So maybe I should, just kept applying to stuff online. The reality was those people were looking for online applicants because they didn't have a network of people to reach out to ask for recommendations. They didn't know anyone. I don't think that means you can't find good people on the internet. You absolutely can. But it does mean that if there are specific kinds of work that you want to make, find the people making that work. Invest in showing up. Okay, maybe you're not going to end up on set right away. Maybe that means you're reaching out to a cinematographer and you're saying, can I show up at your prep day? Can I show up if you're doing a test? Maybe I can be a set of hands there, and you can learn from those people. It's doing that kind of a thing. And I think I had to learn that it's okay to reach out to people. It's okay to put your work out there. I wish it took me 4 or 5 years before I started feeling comfortable to put my work out there. And even right now, I struggle with it. Perfectionist gets in my own way. I won't even share work from some of the biggest projects I've shot because I start to get self-conscious about that work. So it's learning to be confident about your work, be humble in the process, and also to share the work with people. And I genuinely think the point of sharing your work is actually so you can inspire other people. So you can inspire them to be able to learn something about the process. You don't know what it is that makes you unique until you start telling people about your process. And they're like, I never would have done it that way. I didn't even know that was a way of doing things. And then in that process, there's actually something really exciting about witnessing. I did a short film in Japan and I had a crew of 4 and we made beautiful images together. We did incredible things. We shot the short in 9 days and we would go to the location and then we'd shot list on the day. They took notes of every single setup that we did.
When is the right time to get an agent and what are the benefits?
So I think one of the things early on in my career that I gave a lot of attention and thought and sort of worried about, I think, was, do I need to be in the union? Do I need to have an agent? I think there was this sense that that would bring legitimacy to who I was and legitimacy to the work that I was doing. And I think there's some degree of it where you feel is that the answer to how you get work? Is that the answer to how you stay active and busy? And the reality is, I think you talk to, any DP who has an agent, they're going to give you a variety of answers. The reality is an agent will come to you when the time is ready. That's what everyone told me. And I think that's partially true, but I also think that it doesn't hurt you to look at your options and to survey the field. I think that you don't want to reach out when the time is wrong because you only get one chance to make a first impression. But also, there is a lot of advantages and there are a lot of challenges to having an agent. I think the main advantages are there are times where having an agent is something where it gives you the opportunity to have someone to be a go-between, especially in the business side of things. You don't want to be the bad guy. You don't want to have to talk about the things that you need, or you don't want to create a conversation that, might be off-putting. You can allow your agent to be a go-between or a mediator between that conversation and sort of, typically we're talking about rates or accommodations or hotels or flights or whatever. I think that's a valuable asset to having an agent. I think the very best of agents are the kind of people that you can talk to about your career and your career path. And you guys can work together on making strategic moves in your career in order to go in the direction that you want to go. That's another great value and asset to having an agent. I think that really comes down to the person. That's the main thing I would say. If you're going to be disappointed with your agent, it's probably because you and the agent aren't seeing eye to eye. Not every person is the right fit. It's like a dating relationship. You need to find the right person for you, and you want somebody who cares about you and cares about your work and is passionate about what you're doing. And just to sign with somebody, now you're handing away 10% of your income. And it might be for no reason. What I will say is most of the people I've talked to, it's, most of the time you're not really getting a lot of your work from your agents. You're still getting it from the people that you know, from the people that you've developed relationships with. But there are times where they're stepping in and they are showing up and they're the reason that you find a job that you would never have gotten. And in my case, that's happened on both the commercial side, that's happened on the feature side, where there have been times where my reps were reached out to by a producer that knew them, that wasn't aware of my work, and then they ended up talking with my agent, and my agent put my name and probably 4 or 5 other DPs' names in front of them, and then that person resonated with my work enough that they wanted to interview me. At the end of the day, you're still the one getting the job because you're the one whose work is getting you in the room, and you're also the reason that, in that interview, you have to still sell that person on your work. But having an agent can sometimes make those meetings easier, and it does add legitimacy when an agency or a brand is looking at your work. It does add a sense of okay, somebody else vouches for this person. Somebody else has seen what this person is capable of, and also gives them another point of reference to talk to. Because something you also have to realize is your agent, just because they signed you or signed with you, they're also going to check in with producers that they're putting you up on jobs with and say, how did that go? Was this person a good fit? They want to make sure that they're serving the producers that they work with and the agencies and the people that they work with. They want to make sure that those people are happy with the clients that they're putting in front of them. So it really is a matter of reputation. I really wanted to have an agent earlier and earlier in my career. And there have been times where I've been so busy that it's helpful to have somebody else dealing with my calendar and dealing with my rates and, making sure all of that's taken care of so that I can just show up, do my job really well, and like have people like me and then go back. And then there are times where you're just so slow and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm spending, 10% of this. But I think there is it's a part of building a long-term relationship and a part of building a long-term business relationship with somebody. And it's worth it for the right person. It's worth investing in that relationship so that you guys can both thrive together.
What tips do you have on how to land that dream job?
I approach every interview with this fundamental perspective of I can't pitch on something that I don't believe in. If a project is not something that excites me, if a project is not something that I feel I can put the full weight of my creative energy and force behind, I typically won't even interview for the job because I don't think I'm going to get it if I don't want it. That's kind of, just like kind of the baseline. For me, I really think that you have to know your own voice. You have to know your own passion and you have to know your own interest in order to be able to fight for the things that you want. And then once you know there's something that you want, I give it everything. Depends on the job. It depends on the interview and it depends on how much time I have. Some of the prep process on an interview is trying to figure out how to calm my anxiety. It's working out, it's meditation, it's just finding a way to kind of calm the nerves, just like when you were a kid and you were prepping for a test. Because at the end of the day, you can't control whether that person's going to like you or say yes to you. You have to go in confidently with the best ideas that you have and know that you're going to be able to express yourself well, that you're going to express your ideas well, and also that they're going to get a sense of who you are. I don't believe in performing because I think that ultimately you want to be yourself because this person is going to either connect with who you are and want to work with that person or not. And the reality is every director that's looking at you in an interview, your work got you there. You're a contender. You would not be in that interview if they didn't think you were capable of the job and that your work was capable. I don't really spend a lot of time talking about, I'm good because of this or this or this. I'm a lot more interested in talking about process. I'm a lot more interested in talking about their on-set rituals, their approach to actors. I want them to know me as a person. I want them to know my approach. And I think, a lot of the questions I'll ask in an interview, I'll go in and I'll ask, if this movie was on the shelf next to two other movies, what would those be? So I'll often ask a variety of questions. Some of them are things like, what's your on-set methodology? How do you like to work with a DP? What's your ideal kind of relationship? What does that look like? Are you a single camera director or do you like working with multiple cameras? What kind of structure and rhythm and flow do you like on set? Because some directors don't like to cut and they just like to keep rolling, and some directors want to be very specific and we shoot with oneers. So a lot of it is trying to find that out. What are some of your favorite filmmakers or artists? Why do you want to make this movie now? And then, I often like to ask, were you listening to an album or when this was being written, was there an album or some kind of music or some kind of painting that inspired you? It's really just trying to get a sense of what is the project and what do they sort of see the project as? And then you're also talking about common reference points. I think part of my prep for an interview is I'll usually watch a few of the movies the director has done. I'll watch movies related to the project. If I have more time, that is. If there's more time, a lot of times I'll put together a lookbook and I'll actually develop my ideas, in a visual way so that I can present them to the director. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes that doesn't really make sense to do, and you're going into the interview and you kind of don't know where it's going to go. And one of the values of actually having done like interviews over Zoom is I can also jump into my process for prepping a movie while I'm in the interview, because I can take them into my Google Drive, go into that film. I can show them references I pulled for a movie. I can show them how I shot listed a specific film. I can show them lighting diagrams from a specific movie. So I can start to give them a sense of the kind of work that I do and the way that I work in general. And I think every director is different. Ultimately, part of why they're interviewing you is they want to know, could I sit in the trenches with this person for 2, 3, 4, 5 months? Would I enjoy that? And they can obviously talk to people that you've worked with, but they're also just trying to get a vibe of who you are as a person. That's part of why I think it's about being authentic to who you are. And also, you don't want to sell a visual language or a movie that you don't want to make. If you go into a movie, like rather than always trying to figure out what the director wants to hear, I'm really trying to pitch the kind of movie that I want to make. So I prep for interviews with, a variety of approaches, I guess I would say. But I think that the fundamental core is trying to gain a great sense of the material, gain a sense of the director and their working style and approach, and also a sense of how I've reacted to their films, and I've had the experience of interviewing with directors who I've been fans of their work since I was in high school, and that is both daunting but also exciting. You're not going to win every job. So all you can do is you put your best foot forward, and then you have to let go, and that's really tough to do. I'm not always good at it, but I try.
How do you stay confident in your craft when there are those missed opportunities?
It really depends on the specific movie, and it depends on the relationships involved. A lot of the films that I've interviewed for in the last year have been studio projects, and they're looking for somebody with a really specific time frame in mind. So there hasn't, I'm usually getting the script, and then I have maybe 2 to 3 days between getting the script and interviewing. It depends on the film whether or not I'm able to put together a lookbook. But if I can, I love to put together a lookbook because it's a great way to share your point of view on the film. It's a great way to share the themes that you see in the movie. But also, it can be difficult to put that together in a really short amount of time, and it's not always the right approach. I think the way that I've approached a movie after, interviewing, it's still just reaching out, expressing your gratitude, for the experience. Sometimes I don't have that option though, because the interview is set up between producers and my agent, and so you just express, the best way you can, through email, through text, whatever, you express your appreciation for their consideration, and you just have to hope that they resonate with your work and they resonate with what you said in the interview. If you have the opportunity to offer them a lookbook, that can be a really powerful way to express your point of view. In terms of holding on to your confidence after you do hear a no, that's something that we're all reckoning with. I think there's a couple things that I hold on to. One, you were in the room. You don't like to waste your time. I don't like to waste my time. They interviewed you because they thought you were a contender. That means that this person thought your work was worth looking at and that you were worth looking at out of the hundreds of other DPs that they could have talked to, the hundreds of other production designers, or whatever. If you're pitching if you're pitching as a director, it's like this agency thought that your work was among the people who were capable of doing this and might be the right person to do this. So that's part one, I would say, is just recognizing that you were in the room, you're in the ring, you're a part of this. The second part of that is you can't control all of this. What's not meant for you won't end up in your lap, and what's meant for you will show up for you. And that feels cliche, and that feels like a little trite to say when you're going through that moment of rejection. But also, you don't want every job. Not every job is right for you. Not every job is a yes. You want somebody that's excited about you for the job, because you want somebody that's going to believe in you and believe in the vision that you pitched in the meeting. So I think that's also kind of what I've learned to lean on. And you have to recognize that just because you didn't get this job, it doesn't take away anything that you've already done. I've had a couple larger films this year that I've interviewed for, and I don't know how many other DPs they were talking to, had great interviews and, was really happy with the experience. And I walked away from it and I said, I put everything I had on the line for that, and now I can't control what happens. And, it still took me that process of probably the 3 or 4 days of the build up, the interview, And then the post kind of like post-mortem of it, and sort of recognizing like, I didn't get that. Like, I got to let it go. Like, I'm bummed out about that, but I got to move on and find the next thing.
What are the steps you take leading up to a project?
I absolutely love pre-production. It's the time in the process where you get to envision the film. It's both scary and unknown and mysterious and really exciting. I think that every director has their own unique prep process. I've never worked with a director who works the same way. I've worked with everything from a photographer who we didn't do any shot listing, and we just scouted locations and had a lot of conversations about the look and the style and the kinds of films that we loved. And we made a set of rules, and we were like, the movie's all handheld. We're using natural or existing lighting, or we're augmenting what is there to create something that feels naturalistic. The movie explores darkness and contrast, and we went in with a set of rules, but we didn't necessarily shot list the movie. But we spent a lot of time location scouting and, looking at things together and talking about what the film was. I've done everything from that to also working with directors where every single thing is extremely pre-planned. I've used a variety of methods. Usually what that process though looks like is you just start out with very general conversations. You're talking about what inspires you. You're talking about look. You're talking about themes. You're talking about characters. You're talking about arcs within the script. You're scouting locations. When I scout, I always take a DSLR and I shoot a shitload of photos. I use Sunseeker and I record my screen capture of the sun. I shoot a 360 video. I look around. That way, when I look at it later, I have a lot of visual material to look at to kind of dive into what was that location. Sometimes how you feel about a location in person doesn't register with how a location looks through a camera. And so I like to have both of those options. So locations inspire me, and I'm spending a lot of time, doing that, and we're sharing art with one another. A lot of times we'll put together a movie list and we'll watch that and we'll talk about, okay, what from this movie was inspiring? What about this movie? Why did you want me to watch this? And so we're sharing that back and forth with each other. Additionally, while you're doing that, I kind of think of it like you're spinning plates, so you're spinning a bunch of plates at once, and then all of these things are happening simultaneously. And then right before the movie happens, you have a really strong sense of what you're doing and a strong point of view. So on a lot of films, part of the prep process, we'll test cameras, we'll test lenses, we'll test filters, we'll test lights and the gel packages we're gonna use on the movie. We'll look at the wardrobe and we'll look at the actors, and the makeup. And when you're testing with the actors, you're moving a light around them and seeing how do they look with top light? How do they look with side light? How do they look with backlight? You wanna know what that the most difficult lighting situation you might end up in with that actor is, so that you're prepared for how, they look better from this side, and it also creates trust with the actor. So it's actually like this entire, process. Along the way though, as you're having these conversations, you're talking to the production designer, you're talking about the color palette of the movie, and you're talking to the director in this process. And a big part of that is shot listing. I think of shot listing as a chance to rewrite the script. You're rewriting it visually, and I've used a lot of different methods for that. I've used Artemis with a viewfinder and we record it, or we take photos and we put that into a shot list. I've used overheads. I've used, just text. I've used all sorts of different ways. I think any number of those can work, but it sort of is it's creating a guideline or a template for how you see the movie being shot, structured, and cut. And the reality is, I like to think of it as, it's great to know what the box is so you can think outside the box. So you have strong prep so that when you get on set, you can be creative and you can play jazz a little. And that's because you have a really strong idea going in, but now you can riff off of what are the actors doing. You can riff off of, the light's coming in this way, and let's take advantage of that specific piece of light. And also it allows you, creating a shot list in advance and creating like a long document that's a long form document where you see the movie. It lets you pre-visualize the movie in a context where you're not exhausted from working overnights, where you're not exhausted from yesterday's work and you were thinking about that and, oh man, we missed this shot, and then you're coming into today. It allows you to be in a space where you're eating, good food and drinking water, and you're sitting there and there's not the pressure, and you can design the movie together. And then, a lot of times what I will do with the director is we'll take that and we'll refine it by day, and we'll try to keep our setup count to a reasonable count. That doesn't work on every movie. Not every director works that way. You have to roll with what the director wants to do. That's, at the end of the day, you're there to serve their vision. If you guys are designing days that are impossible, it's like you have that conversation with the director. But if you guys are consistently not making your day, it's like the producers are going to step in and say something. And the reality is they may force a shot list to happen. Some directors don't like to shot list. That just is what it is. I really try to be flexible in the pre-production process. I have a variety of ways I like to go about things, and I like to show the director things. On a movie like Saw, we tested every single trap 4 different times, where we ran it through with stunts, prosthetics, art department. We weren't able to work the lighting in because that would have meant we had to rent the lights. We would have had to set up everything. So we weren't able to present that in pre-production. But we were able to do tests where I was like, this is the gel package that we're using through the movie. It's this fluorescent green. It's this half straw with half CTO for our sodium vapor, like kind of ambery look. It's Oklahoma yellow for this specific, we tested that. Our red is a primary red, not a Vitoro, Storaro red. It's like we were able to test that and figure out what works. And I could show the director, okay, here's the lens, here's 5 different lenses. What are you reacting to? What do you dig? What do you like? What's the vibe of the film? And in that process, you're defining, are we shooting 1.8.5? Are we shooting 2.39? Are we shooting 4.3? Some of that's location scouting and you're shooting stuff. If you're rehearsing with the actors, I'll just go sit and be a fly on the wall and you see, okay, these are actors who really like, you shot listed this. Well, you might have blocking in mind, but those actors a lot of actors don't do well if you just tell them exactly what to do. They need to find it. They need to emotionally invest in what it is. And so you want to give them that space. That is a little bit of flow that you have to get into. And so it's kind of finding that rhythm, and the main point of pre-production is to develop a community of trust so that when you get into the trenches and you're making the thing, you guys know what it is you're doing, kind of like what are our anchor points, visually, emotionally, thematically, and then you're able to take that and hold on to that as you face all the challenges of every single day. It is about building relationships with your other department heads, because you want to be able to lean on them. I often work with the production designer around color palette because I'm going to take the color palette that they're imbuing into the set and into the spaces, and I'm going to use that in my lighting, and I'm going to play with that. And maybe I'm keying with a certain color, filling with another color, and then accenting with another color. Maybe it's all monochromatic and we're living in a very specific, it's a single source that's falling off and dramatically in one way. And that's where you're defining the rules of your film. On some movies, I have no fill light, no backlight, no edge lighting. Like, it's very specific, and you try to design it specifically to that film.
As a filmmaker, you know that every shooting day depends on precision and coherence. Every scene, every shot, every detail must align to bring your vision to life. That's where MasterShot comes in. Designed specifically for the pre-production and production stages, MasterShot empowers you to import scripts effortlessly and start building your vision from the ground up. Build a detailed shot list to ensure every angle and moment is planned to perfection. Keep references in one place for quick and easy access throughout the process. Plan dynamic, flexible schedules that adapt to the realities of set. Share projects with your crew to keep everyone aligned every step of the way. With MasterShot, you can avoid on-set mistakes by using digital schedules that captures every critical detail, minimizing risk and maximizing efficiency. MasterShot is your assistant, ensuring that every moment on set is dedicated to your craft. Start using MasterShot today. Try it free via the link in the video description. And now let's get back to our guest and the next question. When building your team for a production, what are the steps to take?
One of the most important aspects of pre-production is also hiring your crew. It's not something you should overlook. These are going to be the people that can make or break your day. Emotionally, they're going to be the people who you have to lean on as you're sitting in the trenches. I spend a lot of time interviewing people. I always call 2 to 3 references. I want to make sure that these people are exceptional at their job. It's one thing for a first AC to tell me, I'm great at pulling focus. I never ask an AC if they're good at pulling focus. Like, they're obviously going to say yes. What I ask them is, how do you tend to work well with a DP? What kind of gear do you tend to use? I'll ask the gaffer that as well. What kind of lighting do you tend to do? Like, what sort of style feels appropriate to you? What kind of LED units do you work with? What kind of units do you work with in general? If, say, you were lighting a big daytime interior and we were looking for something that was, shafts of light. You're kind of wanting to gauge both their technical proficiency, but also just their attitude, how they are emotionally. And a lot of times that's why you have to talk to references. I talk usually to at least 2 to 3 DPs that have worked with that gaffer or first AC, because I want to know when it's 2 a.m., and we're all tired, how are they? Are they great on set? Are they somebody that's an anchor? Are they somebody that you can trust? Are they somebody who's steadfast? I can't emphasize enough how important that is. Additionally to that, it's also about hiring crew that is going to make your talent and your director feel comfortable. If you're working with a female director, do you want her to show up and every single person she sees is a man? Like, that is going to create an environment that she's working in where suddenly, like, she's gonna feel out of place. It's being conscious of that, I think, is really important for us as artists. And it's also important in terms of the industry at large. It's like, are the sets you're on, do you want them to reflect the world at large so that the choices that are made on set are more realistic and they speak to a diverse set of voices? I think that's also important. So I think you have to weigh those things. And it's very difficult when you go on a movie and you're in another country or you're in another state and you don't know people and you're leaning on references and people around you. Like, you have to do the best you can. And frankly, you're not going to always hire the right person every time. You make the best with what you have. And if it's not a good fit, it's better to recognize that early and part ways early on, which I really have not done because I really do try to succeed with the people that we've hired.
Do you have any tips on how to make a production run smoothly?
Once you've done all the pre-production, it's like you get to the most exciting part, which is production. You get to finally do the thing, and I love it. I love the chaos of it. I love all the trucks, the lights, the actors. Now we finally have this limited window of time that we get to do this really unique and special thing in. And I think the main thing that I emphasize on set is presence. Like, your goal is about creating this beautiful little window of time, this opportunity between rolling the camera and calling cut, where we're all locked in, we're all in this kind of Zen space where we're living for one specific thing, which is to capture the emotional moment that's happening in front of you. And so that, to me, is the most exciting thing about it. It's really intense. It's really exciting. You're there, you're locked in with the actors, you're watching what they're doing with their hands, you're staying present with the energy that's on set. And I think that's the main thing. I'm looking for crew and people that are proactive, that are thinking ahead, that they've paid attention to the prep that we've done and delivered to everybody. But then they're also thinking, all right, what's coming up next? How can I make that easier? I'm thinking in terms of, how do I light spaces so that I'm not lighting every shot uniquely, so that the actors can stay in a flow. I've lit, with an area, and then maybe we're bringing in an highlight, or maybe we're bringing in a little fill or a little kiss of something, but it's actually thinking about, in larger context, how do I keep the flow of set moving? I think a great AD is like somebody who really gets that and is important in that. And the best ADs I worked with are storytellers. They're fighting for you to get every shot that you want and you need in order to tell the story. But so much of it is about flexibility, adaptability. You have to know when to cut shots and you have to know when to fight for them. And you have to be able to do that on the fly. And I actually thrive in and love that kind of intense, fast-paced, uncertain environment. It's why you prep really hard, so that when you get into that and shit hits the fan and something doesn't quite work, you can pivot. And often you find in the pivoting, you find something better where it's like, we can combine these two shots, and you kind of see it come to life. I actually just love being on set. If I could just do that part all the time, I would.
How involved are you in the post-production?
As a cinematographer, my experience with post-production is very minimal. Often the directors will show me a cut and get my thoughts if we developed a sense of trust. But, the director themselves may not have final cut. I will weigh in and, with a space of trust. But there is also a sense in which I know I'm too close to the project usually to have like really great notes, because I remember most of what we shot. And usually the first time I watch a movie I've shot, I'm just dismayed because I'm like, I wish I had done so many things differently. And then eventually you calm down and you realize like, no, like I can watch this as a movie and for what it is. So most of my experience of post-production is actually involved with the color process. And so much of that is casting the right colorist, getting the right person for the visuals. And then in the process, it's just a very tedious thing of sitting in a room with a laser pointer, getting the images to sort of flow in a way that feels right. And that's really unique to every movie. And you kind of have to go all in on that. And it takes time. It's a process I love for the results, but the actual process is difficult for me because it's a lot of sitting alone in a room that's really dark. And I prefer to be out and among people and among life, but it's such an essential part of the process. So I love doing it. It's something I'll fight for, and I'll fight for my time to be in there with the colorist because I want to make sure that we're able to get the images that we spent all this money and time running these lenses, running these lights, to shoot. I want to make sure that they land exactly how we were planning.
Can you tell us one of your favorite on-set moments?
There are countless moments on every project that feel like magic, where you couldn't have predicted it. It's a scrap of sunlight coming in, or it's an actor doing something or turning in a certain way. I've even had experiences where something didn't work out in our favor and we had to relight something in an entirely new way. Or the director got, there was a time I was shooting a film in Mexico and the director got stuck in traffic for 4 hours, and we had never scouted the location that we were at because our schedule hadn't permitted, and we'd lost our other location. And so I walked in there and I had a full team. And I had to be able to look and say, the director can't show up with the actors 4 hours late and us not be lit. But I don't know what we're doing exactly because we've never looked at this space together because we booked this just yesterday. You make the best sort of intention. And in that scene ended up being so beautiful. We ended up putting a bunch of 9 lights basically on multiple sides of the space, essentially creating giant backlights from either side. We hazed up the space. It was a sort of a fighting interrogation kind of action sequence on the very first movie I shot in Mexico. That's an example of where I didn't know what we were going to do when we went in. And what we ended up getting was these really gorgeous silhouetted images because we were able to walk into the space, adapt to what was happening, and kind of roll with the punches. And it ended up being some of those beautiful sequences in the movie.
We want to hear more about the magical moments. Can you tell us one more?
So there's a project I shot in Japan where I was so excited to do it until I realized all crew, all actors, all gear had to fit in 3 vans. And I was like, what? All of our lighting, all of our camera, everything. And so we had extremely limited space. But what that actually ended up resulting in were some of the most beautiful images I've ever shot, because it took away my ability to use big lights to do certain things. I was using natural light and I was softening that up and adding a little bounce card. And suddenly we had these really high contrast, beautiful soft light images that I think if I had tried to use lighting to do it, I would have overcooked the image. I would have done too much. Sometimes it's actually less is more. And so getting into a situation where you actually strip everything away and you don't have the time, you don't have the resources to do something can actually lead you to a great idea. It's that whole sense of necessity is the mother of invention. That is kind of the thing that comes to play sometimes.
Could you break down your favorite scene from SawX?
Okay, so I'm very excited to talk about Mateo's brain surgery trap with you. This was one of a few trap sequences in SawX. We spent a lot of time in pre-production designing this, and among the things that we did in pre-production in order to make sure that this was going to work, we tested this trap 4 or 5 times. This involved working with the prosthetics company, which was Fractured Effects. They did Westworld, Eyes of Tammy Faye. They did The Nick. They've done a ton of stuff that I love. They did incredible prosthetics. So they designed the brain prosthetic that we actually use. And so a lot of what you're doing is you're figuring out what are the prosthetic pieces, what are the pieces where there are blood, and what are the sort of special moments of this trap. That sort of starts with a variety of things. Kevin, the director, did a series of storyboards with a storyboard artist very early on. Those were not done in correlation with the shot list. Those were just done to show the producers, to show the actors, to show the artists involved. This is the general idea of what this trap is. We always knew that this trap was going to have kind of Catholic undertones. He's wearing essentially like the crucifix, he's wearing like a cross on, or like the crown of thorns on his head. We were playing with this idea of like Dante's Inferno was sort of what was driving the idea of like this descent into hell into SawX. So as the traps start, we were sort of playing with that idea and sort of using colors to descend it further and further into this kind of dark, grimy, murky, muddy sort of space. And my whole thing with Saw is it's essentially if Seven was a new metal music video, you're sort of like trying to create a world where it feels like you need a tetanus shot afterwards. It's rusty, it's drippy, it's oozy, it's unsettling. It's a bit grotesque. And so in this case, what we wanted to do was essentially we tested the trap a bunch of times. We like designed each of the pieces, we played with that. Then Kevin and I got into it and we developed the shot list. And Kevin is a very specific director. He works as an editor on a lot of films, and he's also worked on a variety of Saw films. So he has a really good head on his shoulders when it comes to this is the order of events that we need. We have to shoot it out in this order because once blood is flowing, it's hard to clean up. So we were really shooting the trap in a methodical way in order to get us into the trap, then get us into the actual prosthetic cutting, and then get us into the end of the trap and the brain piece being removed. So part of the process of that was we're talking about camera movement, and one of the fun shots that we designed and thought of was it'd be so funny if when we reveal Billy, we have a camera mounted onto the tricycle and it's kind of bouncing along with the tricycle and all the medical devices are bouncing along. So we designed that shot, we did it, it's very funny, we love that shot. But part of that was, this was the reveal of Billy in the film, and then this is also the brain surgery trap. How do we make each sort of moment unique? And one of the big challenges of SawX was similar to the first film, and unlike any of the other films after that, it's essentially one location. The lighting could all just sit and be one look, and then the movie is one thing in all the trailers and throughout the arc of the movie, it's just one look. We didn't want that. I wanted it to be an evolving arc that was something the audience could experience, that they could partake in, and that would give each trap its own unique look and feel. So for the brain surgery trap, what I did was when Mateo gets abducted earlier in the film, I actually baked the exact same color palette into the abduction to sort of foreshadow what the brain surgery trap would look like. And we knew that we wanted those to be blues, greens, and kind of whites. So we're going with fluorescent blue, arsenical kind of poisonous green, and then kind of whites. And those are things that we're drawing from Saw 1 and Saw 2. So the base look of the warehouse, we had set this kind of ochre yellow, like Oklahoma yellow colors, and we had our deep backgrounds. I kind of thought about it as like three-dimensional color space. We had sodium vapor in the background, ochre yellow in the foreground, and then green accents around the room. But when the brain surgery trap happens, the idea is that John is firing each of these traps, or really John isn't. I mean, the characters all start their own traps. They pull something, that starts the trap. So when Mateo pulls the please play me and he hits play, that sort of sets things in motion. And my idea was that John had each of these connected to a circuit breaker. And so every trap that starts, lights flick on, and when a trap ends, all the lights associated, they turn off. And so that created a revolving look inside the room so that each trap that starts and each trap that ends is actually taking a unique look. And so for the brain surgery trap, what I wanted to do was no light is, in this world, from a filmmaking perspective, we're using LED lights, but we're housing them inside of industrial fixtures as a way to make them embedded in the space and feel like they're a part of the space. And so what I wanted to do was use LED fixtures, but make them feel like industrial fixtures. So no light plays twice. If a light is on, it's on as a specific color. If it's off, it's off. If it's on as another, it's on as another color. So when we transition into the brain surgery trap, we go from the base look of the room into this blue and green kind of look. And so the lights shut off and then these kind of flicker on with the fluorescence and the sort of, industrial fixtures coming on. And then what I wanted to do inside of that was I used the blues and the greens to kind of key the space. But then what I was doing was I also was dirtying the light with, I was bringing like an Astera in and dirtying it with a little Oklahoma yellow. So you get this kind of mixture of color that's kind of dirty, and there's a lot of contrast, and it's rough and it's raw. We shot everything at 2000 ASA on the Venice. In order to create some texture, we added grain and post. We also were using pearlescent ones on Cooke Classic lenses. So it had kind of a vintage quality anyway, because we wanted to feel like the older 35mm Saw 1 and 2. We shot 1.8.5 because the boxiness of that feels like Saw. It's characters in boxes, they're in claustrophobic spaces. And so that was a choice that we made. And then we used a mixture of techniques from dolly, pushing in on the character, to handheld. I used a Blackmagic 6.8 camera and shot at 6 frames a second and was shooting all the stutter frames in order to create those Saw like flash frames of pain. So we're using a variety of those techniques in order to create this kind of visual assault on the senses to make a visceral, painful experience for the audience. That was kind of the approach that we took in order to designing and developing this scene. And then the one other piece of the scene is, Billy, kind of the reveal of Billy. And I wanted something that was loud, something that felt like giallo, something that was like in your face and kind of funny. So I referenced the first movie and I referenced the second movie, and it's like in the first film, a light just kicks on and it's kind of garish and ugly and Billy's there. And I wanted to do something similar to that. So we set up a Joe Lico behind him, and then boom, it kicks on. There's a huge shaft of light coming out of this room. We did not haze the space. That's how much dust was in the air in the warehouse. So I don't know what I was breathing the whole time we were shooting. And that's just bouncing back up on him. And we did a lot of work in pre-production, to design what the warehouse was. A lot of that was constructed and designed by our production designer, Anthony Stabley. That was an empty glass warehouse, and we designed and built so much of it in. And we're building in tone, we're building in texture, we're building in grading and all sorts of stuff into the space. A fundamental part of that as well is also, Saw, the traps are very much based around timing. So we always shoot the clock, in wide shot and close up. And then it was actually important that we have the clock in a high kind of space, within the warehouse, because otherwise it has to be VFX every time. Because inevitably in the edit, you're shooting, you're cutting, you're shooting, you're cutting, and the clock doesn't match. So we wanted it somewhere kind of separate so we could shoot it. It's a separate piece. And we shot almost every trap in one day. So we have to move like lightning. You're getting a lot of pieces of coverage, but you're also working with incredibly talented people. And we always shot every scene in SawX with 2 cameras, sometimes 3. And this was a case where we shot with 3 cameras. So you just move very quickly, you prepare as much as you can, and then you get into the bloody mess of it all.
Let us take you behind the frame. Check out today's featured project from our special guest, complete with a detailed shot list and storyboards, in the project example section on MasterShot. Dive behind the scenes to see how it all came together, and you'll also get a sneak peek at the exciting projects coming up in future episodes. What was the worst thing that happened during a production, and what did you learn from it?
One of the things I love about filmmaking is the unpredictability of it. We're kind of trying to orchestrate world building within the real world, which is unpredictable and chaotic. And I enjoy that attempt at control. And sometimes the world just laughs at you. I think on a lot of sets, I've had a variety of things happen. The worst days are the days where there's interpersonal issues and people have to be fired for, horrible things that they've done. I think those are actually the most challenging days, and the days where I've actually had to sit down and talk to multiple crew members and make sure everybody's okay. That's where you actually feel like you're a team. That's where you feel like it's us against them. I've been on sets where we had an actor inappropriately touch one of our makeup artists, and he had to be let go immediately. And it's that changes the entire course of the experience of making the film, the entire course of the day. And that's where, filmmaking aside, you have to address your common humanity. There's legal steps that have to be taken, all that sort of thing. But that's really the worst kind of thing that's happened, I think, in a lot of ways. The stuff that's crazy and weird and unexpected. And I've seen everything from, I saw a parkour stuntman put a nail through his hand after jumping across like a building, and we had to finish shooting the fight scene and stunt scenes that day. So send him to a hospital. We got a different stunt double in. We had to shoot over their shoulder. You just have to be ready to adapt. That's the kind of stuff that happens. I've literally had, I had even on that same movie, I had a van that like somebody put in neutral and we watched it roll down a hill and into somebody's house, and it's like, you have to figure out, okay, we don't have all the gear that we thought we were gonna have. How do you keep going? I've even had on a movie, like our main location. This is a thing that happens a lot. The main location that we had vied for, we had fought over, we had shot listed for, we lost it 3 days out from principal photography starting. You have to take the core ideas of what you've made. You have to take those ideas and then reimagine them in the new space. And so much of that is learning to think on your feet. It's learning to be able to improvise, and you do strong prep so you can improvise well. And I think that's kind of the main thing I would take from anything that happens. I've had so much weird stuff happen that anything could possibly happen and I'll roll with it. Personally, when I was on Saw, I got COVID. I got food poisoning. It's the first time I vomited in front of 10 different people on crew, which was not fun. But I went out, like after the food poisoning, I just went to the medic. I got an IV. I was back on set in 45 minutes. And it's like, you just got to roll. And I was like, I'm not letting anyone else shoot this movie.
How do you stay consistently working in an industry that is so inconsistent?
One of the great challenges when you're first starting out is, how do I get work? There is no magic bullet answer. The best way to do it is create the kind of work that you want to make and share it with people and then do it again. And so some of that is about taking a risk and investing in yourself. And that might mean shooting your own shorts. That might mean shooting small projects, but you have to have work in order to get work. That might mean making friends with other people who are making short films or making small projects in order to build a relationship and make something with them. But in the end of the day, you probably are gonna have to invest in yourself and invest in your own work. There's that idea of one for the reel, one for the meal. You have to live that out a bit. And so one of the ways I went about finding people and meeting people was, film meetups, film forums, Vimeo, Kickstarter. I was looking for cool projects on Kickstarter and Seed and Spark. I was using Staff Me Up, Mandy, Craigslist. I got an IMDb Pro account, looked for what was in development and reached out to those people. You have to be proactive about reaching out to people. They're not going to discover you by chance. And so a lot of it is about reaching out to people and getting your work in front of them. And then also, like in a tertiary sense, using Instagram, using Twitter, using TikTok, whatever makes sense for you and works for you, sharing your work into the world. And I don't think of that as directly one-to-one building relationships. And, I've gotten some work from doing that, but it's mostly come from my building of relationships. So I think you just have to be intentional about creating work and putting it out there.
What tools or resources would you recommend to filmmakers?
There are a variety of tools and websites and that have been really helpful for me in my kind of growing process and in my process at large. One thing I want to point out is become friends with your rental house. Like, they have been one of the major resources for me in shooting tests. They don't charge me to go in and try a new set of lenses, try new filters. That can be a really great way to build up. I have a bunch of drives full of different tests that I've done. That's a way to grow yourself and learn things when you're not on the job, when you're not under pressure. So I think building relationships with manufacturers, building relationships with your rental house, that's just one way in which you can continue to grow and continue to learn. Another thing I would say is websites that have been helpful for me and magazines and reference points that have been helpful for me. American Cinematographer, it's fantastic. They have back issues, dating back decades. They have all sorts of information that you can learn, and I've learned so much from that. There's a ton of books that I've learned a lot from filmmaking, but I would say Bruce Block's The Visual Story is really influential. Cinematography by the rewrites were done by David Mullen, but that book has been really influential. Film Lighting, which talks with gaffers and cinematographers, is a great book. There's actually something called New Cinematographers it was actually written in the early 2000s, but it's got stuff from Harris Savitas, it's got stuff from Darius Kanji, really detailed lighting plots, really detailed work. That's something that I recommend as well, because that's a really fantastic book. In addition to a bunch of books, and there's just so many that I could keep naming, I would really highly recommend, I found a lot of help on a bunch of different forum websites. Red User has some great forums. David Mullen specifically has over 5,000 pages on Red User that he talks through tons of technical challenges. He's also very active on cinematography.com, and there's a ton of threads on there that are super helpful and I learned a lot from. The American Cinematographer podcast is great. There's a podcast called Work in Process that's really been valuable. There's Team Deacons, which is a really great cinematography podcast, and just filmmaking podcasts in general. I've also learned there's a podcast called Good. There's just a ton of filmmaking podcasts that have all sorts of great stuff and valuable insights that I really would recommend. Shot Deck is something I use all the time. It's great for finding reference materials, great for finding ways to express your visual ideas on screen. Film Grab has similar things. FrameSet has similar things. Using all of those is really valuable. Additionally, I use Artemis as a viewfinder on almost every project. I've been using Sunseeker on almost every project in order to calculate sun paths and look at that sort of thing. So those are a part of my just regular tools that I use. Obviously, I have a light meter, and I just recently picked up a monitor. It's been really helpful because I can save screen grabs, and rather than having to consult the script supervisor or editorial, I can just pull up screen grabs that I've taken while we're shooting the project as a way to reference something we shot earlier in the film. So I can make sure that I'm hitting the same sort of marks, that the visual style still lands in the same place. Those have been just a variety of some of the things that I've used, both as tools, websites, and others that have been really helpful for me.
What are your thoughts on the future of filmmaking with the rise of AI?
I think that a question that every filmmaker right now is facing is the constant change of workflow. And one of the big question mark points right now is artificial intelligence. And I think we're using that term too broadly. There are a variety of different methods. There's of AI, it's like we use that to describe all sorts of things, but there are ways in which generative AI is a different thing than something that's called AI, that's just an algorithm that makes certain processes easier. So I think that I'm not somebody that is afraid of the fact that there might be ways to do things that are, more easily, or there might be a way to speed up the process. I welcome those sort of changes. I welcome ways of saving money, saving time. At the same time, I'm not worried that an algorithm that's pulling from pre-existing material is going to create what the human experience is capable of creating. It's that fundamental reality that we've gone through birth, we've gone through the trauma of life, we've gone through the beauty and love and passion of life. An algorithm can't go through that thing. It can only mimicry that. It can only create imitation. And I think there are ways in which that might, advantage us and obviously create job challenges with certain parts of filmmaking, but I don't see it ultimately consuming filmmaking. I think there are other major concerns with AI that are much bigger than the filmmaking industry, and that comes back to the energy cost of data centers, and how much money it's costing them they're literally losing money right now in order to continue expanding in those markets. They can only do that so long before it has to do something that's fundamentally useful and frankly money-making. And so that's going to continue to find itself. And I think filmmaking has faced the advent of sound, it faced 3D. You watched in the music industry, piracy, and also they've faced for a lot longer than film. They've faced this sort of creating digital artists and other things. Ultimately, people want to see human films made by humans. And I think that's not going to go away, regardless of whether AI makes certain processes easier or more cost efficient.
What is the main advice you would give to a filmmaker starting out today?
The main advice I would give somebody that's starting filmmaking today is learn your voice. Learn what makes you, you. That's the fundamental need that we have in the world. We need artists who are in touch with their humanity, who are in touch with their community, who are in touch with their culture, and have something to say about it. Live your life. you're not going to have something to say at 20 probably. You have to go into the world. You have to live. You have to experience all the things that life has to throw at you in order to have a voice, to have something to say, to have things that you care about, to have things that you want to fight for. That's the main thing I would say. You want to have a perspective and to be able to share it. And the tools are going to change. You can learn a new tool, you can learn a new system, you can learn a new way of expressing yourself. But if you don't know your own voice, if you don't know your own place in the world, then you're not going to know what you have to say. So the main thing that I would say is learn your voice, learn what you want to express, and then fight doggedly to find a way to express that. Your curiosity and your life experience are the thing that are going to set you apart, and then it's tenacity. Like, don't give up. You're going to face rejection time and time again. And I've had so many moments where I thought, is this going to be the thing that breaks me in, where my career will finally be something and I'll be successful? And I just keep having that feeling. It is a journey, and it is a fight, and it is a struggle. And we work in a gig-based economy, in filmmaking. Every soaring experience you have will ultimately end. And then you'll be left wondering, well, what's the next film that I want to make? And what's the next story I want to tell? And you're going to have to dig in yourself and find some new part of yourself to go out there and do that thing again that scares you. So take risks, stay curious.
What about seasoned filmmakers who are looking for their break? What advice do you have for them?
If you're stuck and you find yourself in a place where you feel like, I'm doing the same things and I'm getting the same kinds of work and I don't want that, the only way to pivot is to invest in yourself. It's to make the kind of work that you want to do. It's to show people what they can't envision for themselves, because this industry, despite being about imagination, has very little imagination for who they're willing to give money to. It's you raise your own money, you make your own project, whether that's a short, whether that's a spec commercial. You go out of your way, you fight to make your own project, and then you show people this is what I'm capable of. And you find a way to do that thing, and it's not easy. And we constantly have to do that in our careers. I don't want to get stuck. I don't want to be someone that people only see as a horror filmmaker. I intentionally am making choices. I'm intentionally going out of my way to shoot other kinds of projects, because I have a lot more genres, drama, and other avenues in which I want to express myself. And you don't want to leave people sort of sticking you in that sort of niche. So you really have to work in order to invest in yourself, to find ways in order to break out of those kinds of niches, because people really want to put you in a box.
Where is the industry headed in the next 5 years?
I feel like I don't know where the industry is going, and I feel like I'm not sure where things are going to land. But what I do know is that brilliant, original, heartfelt stories connect with people, and we're seeing that right now. We saw it in, Baby Reindeer just won, and there's a reason. That was not pre-existing IP, that didn't have huge stars, but it was gut-wrenching and powerful and real and authentic, and people connected with that. And we're seeing that across the board. I'm really hopeful that in the next 5 years, we see a renaissance of independent filmmaking, where there are people who aren't going to wait around on the studios to say yes to them, to go and make a movie. I'm hoping that we're going to see those $2 to $5 million movies coming out, the Winter's Bones, the Get Outs, those kinds of movies that are fresh and have something to say and don't require massive corporate investment for them to get made and for them to be on screen. That's where we're going to start to see originality. We're going to start to see filmmakers really expressing their voices. I think that's going to be one side of the industry. And then I think we're going to have these huge tentpole films that continue to be coming out, and some of those are going to do fantastically. A lot of them are going to be based on a pre-existing IP. That's okay. I love those kinds of movies also. I want to go into a theater. I want to be surprised and wowed by stories. And my hope is that we continue to see that both at an independent level and then also at a studio level. And I do think that we're going to continue to see this push towards auteurs. I think those have consistently been the people who are making original, unique, and rare kind of content. I hate using that word, but stories rare stories that continue to break through. You know, it's the people from Lynn Ramsey to Christopher Nolan to David Fincher. They're getting eyes on their work, and it's because no one else makes a movie like that.
What are your top 3 favorite music videos?
I love all sorts of music videos. I love them for a variety of reasons. And I remember back in my early days watching like Chris Cunningham and Spike Jonze and all these different filmmakers and Michel Gondry and seeing some of the music videos they were making. But 3 music videos that stand out to me and have sort of always stuck with me are Iron Sky, which is just this gorgeous music video that was shot by Robbie Ryan, I think in the Ukraine actually. It's just a gorgeous film. It's a story and it has something to say, and I always love that. I feel like it's lyrical and poetic and beautiful. I also was a really big fan of Born Free, the MIA song, and the music video is really intense. It feels political, it feels propulsive, it feels like it's almost like watching a dramatic action sort of film. You know, it's very beautifully captured, and I love that music video. And then the last one I would say is actually the recent Paul Thomas Anderson music video, Anima, the Tom York music video. I think that just is such a visual feast, and it's so experimental, and also Tom York is such a presence on screen. Those are just a few. It's impossible to kind of say 3 favorites because I think that'll change, you know, every single time you ask me. But right now, those have been some that I've looked at and really, you know, they're real head scratchers.
What are your 3 favorite movies of all time?
3 favorite movies of all time it's really difficult for me, and I'm sure for everyone, because it's sort of like what movie spoke to you at what point in your life. I would say if I was choosing films that were instrumental in me wanting to make films, I would probably go back to Seven. That's just always been a favorite of mine. It was an early film that I watched and I loved it. I still feel like it's one of the greatest genre films of all time. The darkness of the movie, the thematic material of the movie, the way that the movie is told. I watch it before every single movie that I shoot. It's a way for me to get recentered, you know, and just, I love Seven. Kozlowski's Blue is like a film that I watched in college and it touched me on a really deep level. It's visual in a way that you don't expect. It's really emotional and it's something that touched my heart, and I've seen it multiple times, and every time I watch it, it's just such a gorgeous film. It's a part of a trilogy, but Blue specifically, that's the Red, White, and Blue trilogy. Blue is just like one of those films that I adore, and it's something that's touched me for a long time. And then lastly, I would say Andrei Rublev, which is Tarkovsky. I wasn't somebody that went to film school, and I wasn't the person that grew up with Tarkovsky, and I didn't watch a lot of Tarkovsky. I think I saw my first Tarkovsky film in high school. I watched Solaris by myself, and later in my life, I was like, I want to see all of Tarkovsky's films because I haven't seen them. And Andrei Rublev is spiritual, and it's about art, and it's about a nation. And I feel like Tarkovsky managed under a regime that had a lot of censorship to make a film that was still critical of the regime, and to still make a film that was beautiful and brilliant and very moving. And it's such a gorgeous film. So those are 3 favorites that I would mention.
What are the top 3 films all filmmakers should see?
So 3 movies that I think every filmmaker should see are Ratcatcher by Lynn Ramsey. It was one of her early movies, and she is one of the greatest filmmakers alive today. She's actually making a movie right now, which I'm really excited to see. But Ratcatcher explores dream space, and it explores social class in a way that I've never seen any other filmmaker do. I think she's just a really unique voice. She explores violence, she explores class and gender, like in a way that I just haven't seen any other filmmaker do. And I love the visual style and approach of her films, and it's unique to each of them. So I'd recommend checking out Lynn Ramsey's Ratcatcher as one of those 3 films. Another movie that I would recommend is a recent film, Burning by Lee Chang-dong. It's a thriller it came out a few years ago, and Lee Chang-dong is one of the most brilliant Korean filmmakers I've ever seen. He was actually the head of the Minister of Culture in South Korea for a while. He was also a novelist. And Burning it's certainly not for everybody. It's a slower paced film, but it's a thriller. But it explores also an exploration of class and the political landscape of South Korea. But in its specificity, it manages to encompass the universal. And it's just a gorgeous film. There's so much about that film that I resonate with and I kind of draw back to. And then lastly, I'll mention Turin Horse, which is a Bellatar film. Bellatar is an old Hungarian filmmaker who makes these incredibly dark and sad political films that are character driven, but his films are shot predominantly in unbroken oneers. And I'm not talking about the flashy Birdman oneer or the brilliant oneers of like Children of Men or, some of the oneers in Boogie Nights or There'll Be Blood, all of these movies, which I love. I'm talking about stately moving cameras for 20 minutes, that lands somewhere and then moves into something else. And there's a shot in Turin Horse that is so evocative of the opening of the movie that's 20 minutes long about horse running, through the mud and the wind. And they literally flew a helicopter over top of the horse and this rider driving the carriage in order to get the wind whipping things around. And it's just a masterclass in texture and tone. And he's a really brilliant filmmaker who I've really become fond of. And I think early in my career would have found some of his films a little too slow or tedious. And now have the patience to really love and enjoy them. And I highly recommend it. I have so many more I could tell you, but those are 3 I'll say.
What are your top 3 books for filmmakers?
3 of the books that I would recommend to other filmmakers, I'm going to mention 3 photography books. One is The Suffering of Light by Alex Webb. You won't find better street photography with more brilliant colors than The Suffering of Light by Alex Webb. Just absolutely phenomenal. Immediate Family by Sally Mann, which is a really intimate portrait of the South, the American South, and a really intimate portrait of her children. It explores memory space, this sense of like looking through a glass in such a beautiful and profound way. And I really love Sally Mann's work. And so I would strongly recommend checking that out. And then lastly, he's very well known, but I will strongly recommend checking out Twilight by Gregory Crewdson. It's just a beautiful work. And it's one of the first photography books I ever bought. It has such striking surrealist images and this sense of loneliness and this magical realism that I've just not seen in any other photographer. And Gregory Crewdson crafts his photographs like a movie set, and it comes through in the photography in every single image that's captured. Really gorgeous. I'd recommend checking out all 3 of those photography books.
And your top 3 podcasts?
3 podcasts that I would highly recommend you check out as a filmmaker. One that's not a filmmaking podcast is Where Should We Begin? It's a podcast with Esther Perel. She's a therapist and she brings couples into her office for a one-time session and she talks to them about life issues and professional issues. And I think if you're a filmmaker, you should be making films about the stuff of relationships and life. And so I'd actually recommend that as a way to explore your own trauma, to explore your own experience of the world. And it's a great way to sort of start to think about empathy and taking someone else's perspective, which is so much of what we do as filmmakers. So much of what we do is subjectively putting ourselves into another space with the camera, with the lighting, with the choices we make to tell a story. So I'd recommend Where Should We Begin? Team Deacons is just an incredible resource. They interview so many filmmakers and I can't highly recommend it enough. I would strongly recommend you check out that podcast. That's been a part of my life for the last few years, ever since they started it. And then lastly, I would say the American Cinematographer podcast. There's so many great references and resources on that. And they talk to so many different DPs and you learn a lot about different films and how they made them. And I think it's a really incredible platform. I would highly recommend checking it out.
What are your career goals in the next 5 years?
My goal for the next 5 years is to continue to make really provocative, propulsive stories audiences want to see that make them leave the theater talking about the film, talking about their lives, and also that they just have a really damn good time at. I want to make movies that are entertaining and enlightening. And my hope is to be able to make that in larger films where we have the resources to be able to do really expressive visual things. But then I also want to be able to do that in quieter, smaller films that play in an independent space, because I want to work with fantastic actors and give them the space to create really amazing performances that we connect with. And so my hope is to be able to do dark, alluring, sensual, brutal, beautiful movies that have something to say about the world, be something that we see in horror, thriller, science fiction, and drama. My hope is to be able to continue to work in all of those genres, and not just find myself kind of in one. So right now, what that looks like is continuing to build relationships with filmmakers. It's turning down those movies that come into me that are, this feels like a ripoff of something I've already done. I don't want to do something I've already done. I don't want to just do slasher films. Like, I did one of the best slasher films, that's come out in the last 10 years. I want to try other things. I want to play with supernatural horror, and I want to play with crime drama and thrillers. And I have explored in that space, but I'd like to keep exploring there. So my goal is just to keep getting a chance to work with filmmakers who are doing really exciting visual and thematic stories.
Stay tuned. We've got more amazing guests coming your way. Top filmmakers will be sharing their stories, insights, and expert tips to help you elevate your craft. Follow us for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes moments that will inspire and take your filmmaking to the next level. Don't miss out. Subscribe to our channel today.